These are the four gospel accounts of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, copy pasted straight out of your KJV and put all over my floor, all ending with the Last Supper. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and all ending with the Last Supper. They're all beginning with the triumphal entry. Matthew on the far left there is coming from Jericho, northeast of Jerusalem, coming from Jericho, nigh to Jerusalem. Mark is coming from Jericho, nigh to Jerusalem. Luke is coming from Jericho, ascending to Jerusalem. And poor old John over here is got him north of Jerusalem in Ephraim city. But he really doesn't pick up at the action until 6 days before the Passover, small p. This is the 8th. 6 days before the 14th is the 8th. He doesn't pick up the action until long after the 7th, which we all know from our previous, is Jesus speaking in red letter KJV for chapters and chapters and chapters, and we just put it in these red folders because it doesn't have anything to do with the chronology. We put them in these red folders to condense. But Jesus, in his own words in Matthew, says after 2 days it's going to be the 10th. In Mark, he finishes the exact same words, and Mark comments after 2 days it's going to be the 10th. And both of those say it's after 2 days it's going to be the 10th, and they sought to kill him. Luke has similar discussions, but he only speaks about the 68 AD. He doesn't speak about the end of times. He's on the temple, still at the temple. Matthew and Mark have worked from the Temple Mount all the way down to the Mount of Olives, where he's speaking about the end of days. But Luke is given the same speech here, and then he says they sought to kill him, so that we know that these three, where Jesus is speaking for chapters and chapters, is the 7th is coming to an end, and John's going to pick it up on the 8th. So, sorry, John, we're going to have to move you way down here. That's the 7th. We're going to have to move you way down here. Remember, verily I say unto you, wherever this gospel shall be preached in the whole world, there shall also this, that this woman hath done. This is the oil anointing at Simon the leper in Bethany, that all matches up right after our three. I put the red folders together to match up. John, he's way down here, beginning on the 8th. We know all these are the 7th because of this woman, and we've got to mention her. We went over this before. Here we are at Lazarus, anointed the feet on the 8th, and immediately the next day, that night, Judas says, we could have sold it for a bunch. That makes it the 9th, which the next day goes for the 10th, his triumphal entry on a Sabbath. We just moved these red letters, the 7th that we know to be the 7th, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and it doesn't change them very much on the front, on where they started. Coincidentally, they're almost the same size in all their text. From Matthew's account, we know that he comes to them and he sees the roots. And then he has the mountain moving advice. And then once he gets into Jerusalem, the temple, they ask him by what authority, and then he speaks for chapters and chapters. That's how we know it's the 7th. Immediately that day before, this is why we have a line here, and then I have stitchings, making that it is the immediate day. We know that since this is the 7th, that is the 6th. The fig tree cursing took 2 days, according to Mark, so that we know that there's a day. And that's also, so there's another day here with these stitchings added. So this is the 5th. This is the 5th of the Aviv, when he has his so-called Jerusalem triumphal entry. He picks a mom and a colt donkeys, and then he says, all this was done to fulfill prophecy. He sent got two disciples to get 2 donkeys, and all that, yeah, LOL, that comes into play later. Comes into Jerusalem, and he says, who is this? And he says, this is the prophet. Okay? cast out them. He went into the temple that sold and bought and set it, making it a den of thieves. The next day, he sees the leaves on the shade, the fig tree. It's a shade tree. It's the Jonah. It's the sign of Jonah. The Jonah sign. Okay, and then he comes down here, and this is the 7th. So let's just condense this real quick. Okay, so the only thing we've done here is condensed Matthew. There's Mark and Luke with the same red folders. Now we're just putting a big red 7 on the top of that thing, and this is the same thing. Jesus, after 2 days, it's going to be the 10th, so we know this is the 7th winding down. The day before, on the 6th, we had those, remember we had the locking days with the stitches in it? This is where he sees the roots on his way to Jerusalem, the cursed shade tree, and then he goes on, this is where he sees the leaves, the sign of Jonah. He curses the leaf, and the disciples only heard it. Okay? The next day they saw it, so by the roots. Mark 11 shows us the missing day. So this is the 6th. The 5th is the so-called triumphal entry. But don't worry, there's got to be a couple, because the prophecy says 2 different donkeys. And once we figure out the 7th, we know John has the 8th, feet anointing. The other apostles agree on the 9th is the head anointing that night, and the following day is the Jerusalem triumphal entry that John records. Don't worry, you're going to get your triumphal entry. So here's Matthew. This is on the 5th. He's coming from Jericho. He's nigh to Jerusalem. The word come to Bethphage, and unto the Mount of Olives he sent 2 disciples. Word come to Bethphage. They had already been to, they are nigh to Jerusalem. They're not in Jerusalem. They had already been to Bethphage. And unto the Mount of Olives he sent 2 disciples for a mom and her colt. And still it says all this was done, to fulfill. And then he only records three-fourths of the prophecy. That's because there's not going to be another triumphal entry to fulfill the second half of the prophecy until John records it on the 10th. John's the only one that records it on the 10th. What's Matthew recording? He's recording a Bethany triumphal entry on the 5th. They had already come to Bethphage. Where's Mark and Luke? Oh my gosh, I can't reach that far. Mark and Luke have us reading the exact same words at the beginning of their testimonies. Nigh to Jerusalem, unto Bethphage and Bethany at the Mount of Olives, he sent forth 2 of his apostles. It just makes sense to me. And when he was nigh to Jerusalem, he was not in Jerusalem. Unto Bethphage, that he's in Bethphage, but at Bethany, you can try to associate these 2 cities, Bethphage and Bethany, together, but that's really the only reason you get them together is because of this. You go from Bethphage to Bethany, you're going to pass Jerusalem. Anyway, you read it like this: unto Bethphage is where he's at, and at Bethany, at the Mount of Olives, he sends forth 2 of his disciples. Okay, as his little triumphal entry here. Here's his triumphal entry. But guess what? At verse 11, what the hell? Pardon my French. Here's his triumphal entry. Okay? And they that went before cried, saying, hold on. And Jesus entered into Jerusalem and into the temple, and when he had looked round about upon all things, and now the eventide was come, he went out unto Bethany with the... That's a pretty good triumphal entry. All these guys saying all this stuff. He did no money changers, no mention of a prophecy, because nothing has happened yet. A Bethphage triumphal entry